Welcome. This is part 4 of The One and Only Nation Written in the Stars. In this series so far, we've covered a lot regarding the signs in the sky that Yahweh put there at creation. Specifically, those constellations that are formed like a great band around the earth, called in the scriptures the Mazzaroth. And in detail, we looked at them, and we saw that they actually inscribe in the heavens the 12 tribes of Israel. If you haven't seen that, you will need to see that in order to understand the rest of what we're going to be saying here. You can see this series at no cost at tsiyon.net. We were going to go on this week and explain what the meaning of all of this is. However, once I started putting that together, it became very obvious that we're not ready for that yet, because we need to discuss recent signs in the sun, moon, and stars. No, these signs of the Mazzaroth, these are not the whole story. There's more. There are actually recent signs that we need to look at and talk about. So that's what we're going to get into in our video today. What we've seen as we've looked at the Mazzaroth and the signs of the Mazzaroth that unmistakably write the 12-tribe nation of Israel in the stars is a very obvious point, really the main point, and that is the 12-tribe nation is of everlasting importance. If it was just a temporary thing, Yahweh would not have written it into the stars. There is no other nation written into the stars but this one. And, you know, I think some of us have been led to believe about Israel that it used to be important, but it's not anymore. As we look at the Mazzaroth and we see the tribes of Israel actually written into the stars, we should rethink that position, that the 12-tribe nation is truly of everlasting importance. We can find this in the scriptures too. When you look in Jeremiah chapter 31 as just one example, it talks there about the house of Israel and the house of Judah, meaning it's not just the Jews, it's all of the tribes, just as it's inscribed in the heavens. And then Yahweh speaks about the sun, the moon, and the stars, and then he uses that to guarantee that the seed of Israel would be a nation before him forever. What this means about these Mazzaroth signs is that they are the signature of Yahweh on his everlasting covenant with the tribal nation. That's hugely important. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about this in our last video, but let's go on from here. There are recent signs in the sun, moon, and stars that have been revealed. We want to understand that. We want to know that it's not just these ancient signs that matter, but Yahweh is still giving signs in the sun, moon, and stars, identifying what he is doing in the last days. This was prophesied by the Messiah. In Luke 21, it says, there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity. I would submit to you this is exactly our situation right now. The earth It's filled with distressed nations everywhere. And the nations are filled with perplexity. And what I'm going to show you today is that while this is happening, there are signs in the sun, moon, and stars that are identifying important aspects to us during these last days. We have a video production that we did back in 2013 regarding signs that were happening in that period. Of course, in internet time, that's a long time ago. So we have enhanced that video for you, and we've added some graphics and so on to make it more interesting for you to be able to watch. But the content itself is what you really need to know about, revealing important signs that were seen during this time period. The name of this video was the Star of David Planetary Alignments. What do they mean? Now, here are our excerpts from that video.
You might wonder why someone who teaches the scriptures would be interested in planetary alignments in the heavens. To some people, this seems very incongruous. The reason is because I'm one of the Talmudim of Yeshua Messiah, that is, a disciple of Jesus Christ. And Yeshua Messiah gave signs of the last days. And in my ministry, I teach that the last days began in 1967 when Jerusalem was recovered by Israel. That, by the way, is included in the same chapter, Luke chapter 21. Here in this chapter, it lays out signs to look for of this final generation. And of course, we're now deep into that time. And it says there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on the earth, anxiety of nations. We certainly have anxiety of nations on the earth. But what does it mean when it says signs in the sun, moon, and stars? This is, in fact, a reference back to the book of Genesis in what we call the Torah. What it shows us there is that in the beginning, when God, whose name is Yahweh, created the universe and then created the starry heavens, He put the sun, the moon, and the stars in the sky as signs. That's what it says, signs. Therefore, here in Luke, when Yeshua Messiah is talking about signs in the sun, moon, and stars, it's really talking about the same thing that it's talking about there in Genesis. Well, what are these signs? This can include simple things like marking out time, like days, months, and years. This is marked out by the movement of the heavenly bodies. These are signs. But also, there's something in the sky that the Bible calls the Mazzaroth. And from our point of view here on earth, the heavens extend around the earth as if they're a giant belt. You can think of them as a giant viewing screen that goes all the way around our planet. And as you look at this viewing screen, as we pass around, or really as this belt passes around us, what we see is a progressive story that unfolds for us in the constellations. These constellations each have a different meaning. And this was passed down, this information was all passed down through Adam when mankind was created. And it was known to what we might call the sacred line or the holy line of Seth before the flood. As I mentioned, this is called the Mazzaroth in the scriptures. So we're entirely opposed here to astrology, which is the perversion of the signs that Yahweh put in the sky. However, Yeshua Messiah told us specifically to look for these signs in the sun, moon, and stars as signs of the last days. This is something entirely different than astrology. How is it different? Because we do not use the signs in the sky to forecast our own personal future. We do not do horoscopes and all of those kinds of things. This is forbidden in the Torah. Messianic people don't do that. However, it's very different to observe the signs that Yahweh put in the heavens, because He put them there. And He wants us now to look at these signs to determine their meaning regarding His will. This is why He put them there. That's why we're looking at this. So that is the reason we're looking at this Star of David planetary alignment that is happening today, July 29th, 2013. One more thing to share about before I get to explaining regarding this Star of David planetary alignment, and that is about the Star of David itself. Many times I have readers or listeners who go to our website and they will see our logo, and they will notice that it has at its center what is often known as the Star of David, the Mogan David, the Shield of David, the Seal of David, the Seal of Solomon, and a number of other names located here at the center of this logo, which is the Messianic seal. The reason they're concerned is because, as they often point out to me, this particular symbol, the Star of David, is often used by occultists. It is assigned occult meanings. Often it is used in occult rituals. So folks that see this many times are concerned that this must indicate that our ministry is in some way connected with the occult. Well, that certainly is a mistake on their part. It's good, it's commendable that they're careful about that, because the occult can be very dangerous. But I want to explain to you now what the truth is regarding the Star of David. You see, David is an ancient ancestor of mine. And I can tell you some things about this that you're not normally going to find out. In the name David, in its original Hebrew, the first letter and the last letter is the Hebrew letter Dalet. Now, in the ancient Hebrew used in David's time, the Dalet looked like a triangle. It was analogous to the modern letter D. And if you look at a capital letter D, you can kind of see how that would derive from a triangle. Well, as I mentioned, there's a Dalet at the beginning of the name and a Dalet at the end of the name. So it is really these two Dalets from the name of David that make up the Star of David. The Dalet that points upward is pointing towards Yahweh in heaven. The Dalet that points downward is pointing down from Yahweh to David. And together, what this symbolizes is the covenant between Yahweh in heaven and David on earth, known as the Davidic covenant, which is an eternal covenant. And David was the king of Israel and established a house a royal line on the basis of this covenant, so that the Star of David is the seal of David. It is actually in its infancy, in its original creation. It is the symbol of that covenant between David and Yahweh that his entire house and kingdom was based upon. Now, that's a very powerful thing. That is a symbol of tremendous authority from God to the house of David. And as we saw with the Mazzaroth, so also with this particular symbol, the powers of evil, the demonic powers of evil, have also adopted this symbol because of the fact that it is connected with such amazing spiritual power with God in a legitimate way. And they have perverted it for their own use, for use in magic, for use in the occult. Well, does their evil use of this particular symbol negate its original use and its original meaning? The answer is no. Because as we look at this messianic seal, I'd like to tell you I didn't invent this seal. As you can see here, there's a number of artifacts that have been found. This was a number of years ago now. And this seal, called the Messianic seal, was actually found in an area that was used in the very first century by the assembly of James the Just. These were the people who were the very first believers in Yeshua Messiah that met there in Jerusalem. That's where these were found, and were part of this congregation of James the Just that he led. As a matter of fact, James the Just took up the leadership of this group of people that had been led by Yeshua Messiah before he himself was put to death, was raised, and ascended into heaven. Then James the Just, his earthly brother, became the leader of that group. And if you look closely at all of these artifacts, you will see that they all have some version of this messianic seal on them, because this in fact was the seal of James the Just. And that's because just as Yeshua Messiah is of the house of David, so was James the Just. And he was entitled to use this Star of David because it was the seal of his family. It was altered because of the change that had happened due to the coming of Messiah, so that now it included some other symbols along with the Star of David. You can see at the top of it, it has a menorah. This is the traditional symbol of Israel. And it has a fish, which is a traditional symbol of the nations, brought together in such a way that they're joined by the Star of David. So in this amazing symbol, we see represented how the house of David gathers together both the nation of Israel and the believers from the nations into one assembly. That's what this is about. Now, if Yeshua Messiah and the first leader of the early believers used the Star of David in the Messianic seal, and we have artifacts that prove it, why would I not use it? You see, the real meaning of all of this is what I'm representing by using this. With this slide, I've put together an illustration for you that helps to explain exactly what has been going on regarding the Star of David planetary alignment of July 29th, 2013. What you can see from this chart, that's this particular alignment right here, is that this is not the only Star of David planetary alignment, but is in fact one of a series of 13 Star of David planetary alignments that began in 1990 and end in 2013, and then there's not another one for a long time. Well, as you can see, from 1990, there have been a series of 13 Star of David planetary alignments, ending in the year 2013. Now here I have a line. The arrow shows you that this line actually originates earlier, because what this line represents is the final generation timeline. According to the words of Yeshua Messiah, this generation that began in 1967, when Israel recovered control over Jerusalem, is the final generation, and it will end with the return of Yeshua Messiah and the end of this age and the beginning of the next one. So we're very interested in that happening. I think the fact that these Star of David planetary alignments began in 1990 and then have happened since then and increased in frequency even as we get up to 2013 shows you something about the time in which we're living, that things have intensified and things are moving forward with greater intensity all the time, and that is what has happened. The Star of David is about rulership over Israel, and it's actually having to do with the Messiah, who is the king, the ruler in the line of David. But equally, this has to do with the nation of Israel. Now, when I talk about the nation, I'm not just talking about the state of Israel, but I'm talking about the people that descended from Jacob or Israel. The fact that there are 13 Star of David planetary alignments seems to me to point to all of the tribes of Israel. It seems to me that whatever this is saying, it's saying something having to do with all of the tribes of Israel rather than just the Jews, who would be represented by one star, which would be the Star of Judah. Okay, so let's see now, as we follow the timeline, what it points to. Well, that continues down here. And after 2013, we get to 2014 and 2015. And this is when the tetrad moons occur. These also have to do with Israel, and they are very, very significant. What are tetrad moons? Well, they're 4 full moons in a row, and these are often blood moons or red moons. The dates in which these happen are forecast to occur on Passover of 2014, Sukkot of 2014, then Passover, this is in the spring of 2015, and Sukkot of 2015. 4 in a row. Now this is actually very unusual. Tetrads are very unusual. This first came to our attention through a news report, and let me share that with you. This is a news report from WorldNet Daily. As you can see, it's from April 30th, 2008. As you can see in the headline, the speculation about this is this has to do with the second coming. Many people think that this tetrad points to the second coming of Messiah in 2015. There are many people that believe this. This is not the position that I hold, which I will explain to you momentarily. What you're seeing here is information that I simply cut and pasted from the NASA Eclipse website. And all of this information was just directly cut and pasted from their website. The interesting thing is that what you're seeing here is all of the tetrads from 1948 until the ones that are coming up in 2014, 2015. And there's only 3 sets of these. And these tetrads are all the same. There are 4 moons, eclipses, often blood red moons, that occur on Passover and Sukkot and Passover and Sukkot. This is something that is a highly unusual phenomenon, and when it happens, it gets your attention. So, as you can see, during the 1948 to 1950 period, specifically in 1949 and 1950, we have the first of these tetrads. Then, before you get to them again, you get to 1967 and 1968. We have the same phenomenon again, and then the same thing is forecast to happen in 2014 and 2015, and this will not happen again in this century. Well, what does that mean? As we look at our illustration again, and we look at these tetrads, note that I put down some information. The first tetrad of 1949 and 1950 was during the period of the Israeli War of Independence. You might remember that Israel was made a nation in 1948 and immediately entered into war with their Arab neighbors who attacked them on every side. And over a period of time, finally they were able to come up with an armistice in 1949 and basically was secured in 1950. This is the period of the first tetrad. The next tetrad occurred in 1967 and 68. And this is the time period of the 6-Day War and its aftermath. This is the war in which Jerusalem was liberated. Now, both of these events are biblically significant events. Well, you might wonder why I would be interested in this, other than my interest for Israel. Well, if you look at this whole illustration here, and you kind of put this together, it makes a big picture that we could see from the Star of David planetary alignments. You see, since there have been 13 of them, this points to the complete nation of Israel. And one of the most unknown doctrines of Scripture, and yet one of the most certain and most talked about in all of the prophetic books of Scripture, has to do with the return of the remnant of Israel to Israel in the last days. In fact, this happening is a major sign of the last days that Messiah is soon to return. Many people today look to the rapture as the big thing. They expect a pre-tribulation rapture. And as you saw, people are interpreting these tetrads as pointing forward to the rapture. whereas a sober consideration of the facts leads to a different conclusion, that it's really having to do with Israel that will be a game changer. That's what it's about. And particularly with all of these Star of David planetary alignments setting this tetrad up, it tells you 13 times in a row that this is about Israel. What more do you need? But it's not just about the state of Israel. That's what these 13 Star of David planetary alignments are saying. This is about the restoration of the nation of Israel. In other words, all of the tribes of Israel. The remnant from all of the tribes. The Star of David actually points to the house of David, showing that these are messianic believers, in addition to being descendants of Jacob, descendants of Israel. These are messianic believers, believers in Messiah, the rightful king of the house of David. So all of this in this moving timeline forward, culminating here with the tetrads, this would suggest to me that this is all about the remnant of the tribes of Israel returning home. This could very well bring about the conditions for the remnant of Israel to return to their own land. So this is seeming to indicate a real major event here in these last days, leading up eventually to the return of Messiah. However, everything prophesied in the scriptures must happen first, including the return of the remnant of Israel to their land. Now, you may never have heard of the remnant of Israel. You might not even know that the state of Israel and the Jews returning there are not the full fulfillment of the scriptures and what they promise. However, that doesn't mean that this doctrine is not something that is clearly taught in Scripture. However, it has been missed. It is something that must happen. And I believe that's what these signs in the sky are pointing to.
I hope you enjoyed that video. I have a few points I'd like to make about it before we move on, and that is that these Star of David planetary alignments, in a way, were kind of like breadcrumbs leading up to the main event, that is the tetrad moons of 2014 and 2015, which were a pretty big show in the sense that those tetrad moons, each on Passover and Sukkot and Passover and Sukkot, really got the attention of people that something important was going to happen with Israel. And we would expect something to happen within this time frame, since all of these Star of David alignments were pointing to this. We're wondering, did anything important happen during this time that we ought to know about? You know, at the time this came out, there were books about it. We're hearing all kinds of things about it. And basically, none of those things materialized. Did something actually happen with these tetrad moons in this time frame? Well, actually, in 2015, I put out a video about the tetrads and about something else that happened during this time frame. Let's take a look at that video now. This is the Midnight Cry. Perhaps you remember some news articles that came out in the middle of the summer. This was in the newspapers, it was on the internet. They call it the Bethlehem Star. Came out this summer. Well, we're going to talk about that, but before we do, I want to talk about the actual Bethlehem Star that happened 2,000 years ago. This was in 2 BC, June 17th, 2 BC. And what happened is there was a specific kind of conjunction. Now, there had been a series of conjunctions that culminated in this one. And this particular conjunction involves, as you can possibly see in the picture, Jupiter and Venus converging closely together in the constellation of Leo and with Regulus close by. And I'm not going into all the meaning of these individual heavenly bodies and what they all mean. I wrote a newsletter on this last summer. So there's more information in it explaining all of this. But when the Magi came looking for the Savior, it was because of this constellation that you're seeing right here. And it's because this is very rare. Now, there's another aspect of this that nobody talks about that makes this rare. And I want to explain that to you. Now here, I just want to show you is a chart in a book. New and full moons from 1001 BC to AD 1651. And it lists all the new and full moons during that period. And it lists the year of 2 BC. Now, it figures this in a mathematical way, so for math purposes, 2 BC is called -1. But in normal speech, it's 2 BC. And so this lists all of the full moons. From that, I laid out the dates of all of the full moons from Passover to Sukkot in 2 BC. And what you're looking at is that list. So the full moon of Passover occurred on March 20th using our calendar in 2 BC. And the full moon of Sukkot occurred on September 14th. The Messiah star occurred on June 17th. All of these, of course, being on full moons. The Messiah star being on a full moon. Now notice where this falls in the course of the summer. Another thing that we do that kind of stumbles everybody is that we keep the Sabbath based on the moon. And that's because that's the right way to keep it, by the way. And here, what we've done here is we have shown the phases of the moon. And we've got those equate roughly to the Sabbaths. And there's exactly the same number of Sabbaths as there are to each of these. So, according to a lunar Sabbath, okay, this is not your regular circular Sabbath thing that's not connected to anything, all right? This is according to the moon. You've got 12 Sabbaths before the Messiah star. That's from Passover, including the Sabbath just before the Messiah star, and then the Messiah star is the 13th one. Then from the next Sabbath all the way to the full moon of September 14th here, or Sukkot, you've got 12. And the Messiah star occurs right in the middle of those two sets of 12 Sabbaths. Well, interestingly, where does Messiah fit in the stream of time? We have the Mosaic covenant, I would say the Israel of the Mosaic covenant before Messiah, the 12 moons picturing Israel of the Mosaic covenant. Then Messiah comes, then you've got 12 moons picturing renewed covenant Israel. And Messiah is the 13th. You have 12 apostles plus the Messiah is 13. So this star that appeared in the sky, the Bethlehem star, that shone the way towards the birth of Messiah, is very meaningful, not just because it was bright, but also because of where it fell on the holy time calendar. That it actually shows us something. It pictures something. It points directly to Messiah. Got the Messiah in the middle and 12 on one side and 12 on the other. I'd call that the two manifestations of Israel. Mosaic covenant Israel and the renewed covenant Israel. And the Messiah was the light of Israel. And there's so many verses that say that about him. The light of the world, talk about his star rising and so on. Well, all of that happened with him came after a real physical sign of a real light. And this was evidence that things had changed, that the Messiah had come, and this was good news for renewed covenant Israel, for us. And he came to institute that. On July 1st, 2015, there was another occurrence of the Messiah star. And it wasn't as perfect as the one that happened with Messiah. And I'm so glad of that, because we're not as perfect either, are we? But all the elements are there. You've got Jupiter and Venus together. You've got Regulus. All of this happens in Leo. But what about the moons? Let's look at that. It's the same pattern exactly. The dates on the Gregorian calendar are different, but on the biblical calendar, they're the same dates, starting from Passover to Sukkot. It's the same dates on the Bible calendar. And as you can see here, there are 12 before and 12 after the Messiah star. So here we have, after 2,000 years, the reappearance of the Messiah star in all of its elements, including regarding its placement in relation to the moons. And additionally, it's between two of the tetrad blood moons. There are other things, too, that were happening in the skies, unique to our time. Well, it's an interesting question. You know, when this happened 2,000 years ago, there was a bright star in the sky, this constellation, and this prefigured a light that was actually coming into the world. Do you think that this happening again could actually picture a light that's coming into the world? Well, when I asked that of Messiah, here's what he told me. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of Yahweh is risen on you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the peoples. But Yahweh will arise on you, and his glory shall be seen on you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. That is a prophecy about the remnant. That star marks the shining forth of the remnant. As a matter of fact, when it says your light has come, it means that sign in the sky, that Messiah star, has actually come, prefiguring this glory of Yahweh that is rising on the remnant. And when does it happen? You notice this? It says, for behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the peoples. It happens right while there is a great darkness covering the earth. Essentially, this darkness was raised up in the world. And we're starting a whole new thing now. A whole new darkness that is leading us towards world government in opposition to our Creator. So even though darkness is covering the earth, it says, but Yahweh will arise on you, and his glory shall be seen on you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. This is what has happened. A great darkness has come upon the earth. But for the remnant, it's a whole other story. Yahweh is arising on us. And it's time to shine. And his glory is going to be made known through his people in the earth. And things have changed. And he's raising up a people to shine for his name. Can you see that in your spirit? Can you feel that from what I'm telling you? Can you see that there has been a real physical sign of this in the sky? Can you see that what happened in that sign corresponds to what is happening in the world and to what these verses actually say? Friends, what I'm pointing out to you is Bible prophecy fulfilled. Okay, so now what we want to look at is all of these signs. We want to look at the Mazzaroth as a complete sign, and of course we know it's composed of 12 signs. But we're going to look at that in its completeness. And of course, then we have the video that we did in 2013 about the Star of David alignments. And then we have the video we did in 2015 about the Messiah star. Let's fit these all together. Let's start now with the Mazzaroth signs of the 12-tribe nation. What we've seen about this, what is very obvious about it, is that what this is saying, at the very least, is that the 12-tribe nation is of everlasting importance in the plan of the Creator. The revelation of the tribe signs of the Mazzaroth at this time indicates a divine emphasis on the 12 tribes of Israel in this current time frame. What I'm saying about that is this. We've known about the Mazzaroth. We've known that some of the signs in the Mazzaroth meant the tribes of Israel, but we never had it totally figured out. We never had it so that it was complete. In these videos, this revelation is made known of how the Mazzaroth is complete and how it represents all the tribes in order similar to the breastplate of the high priest. This is really an amazing revelation, and the fact that it's coming during this time frame is itself important. Then we have the Star of David planetary alignments. The 13 Star of David planetary alignments again emphasize the 12 tribes of Israel, but in this case following Messiah. That's 13 stars following Messiah. And as we look at this, we see these lead up to the 2014-2015 tetrad moons. These tetrad moons themselves point to something big for the 12-tribe nation during the 2014-2015 time frame. So that, if you were looking at this in order, you already have the Mazzaroth, even though we didn't fully understand what it means. Then we have this series of planetary alignments emphasizing believing Israel that follows Messiah. We have this going from 1990 all the way to 2013. But this itself then is pointing to these tetrad moons, as if to lead up to this big thing that was going to happen during these tetrad moons. Then in 2014-2015, we have the 4 blood moon eclipses occurring on Passover and Sukkot and Passover and Sukkot. Clearly, this is about Israel, right? Because these are appointments that Yahweh has made with Israel as part of his covenant with Israel. We should realize about Passover and Sukkot that these are the first and last covenant feasts of Israel each year. It's as if to cover that whole period of those appointments that we find in the Torah that are part of the covenant with Israel. 2 years in a row, it's pointing this out. Now, how likely is that you would have these eclipses falling exactly on these dates, even 1 year, Passover and Sukkot, but then to have that happen on 4 years, that's quite unusual to happen. Clearly, that's pointing to Israel, not something else. As we look at this more closely, too, we realize that right in the middle of the 4 blood moons, we had a solar eclipse. This was right on the first day of the Hebrew year, which begins in the spring, the biblical year. That solar eclipse, it marks the start of the 2015 Hebrew year, as if saying, okay, it's this year coming up, it's all going to happen, that this important thing is going to happen. And then we had the Messiah star, basically a repeat of the Bethlehem star. And this occurs exactly between Passover and Sukkot of this 2015 marked year. This is what all these other signs were pointing to. The Bethlehem star, the biggest star sign that has ever occurred, marking the coming of Messiah about to be born. And now we have a repeat of that sign. Is it any wonder all of these star signs pointed up to this particular sign? This celestial fanfare that has been unfolded here, it's indicating something very important. And it's this Messiah star. Why is it indicating this sign? Well, the reason is this, because the Messiah star itself is an indication of an otherwise invisible event of prophetic importance. You know, when we look at the Bethlehem star, the world did not know the Son of God was about to be born into the world. A few people knew, but there was no announcement by anyone about that. The announcement was in the sun, moon, and stars. That was the sign. Well, the repeat of that sign in 2015 is very similar. It's actually indicating the start of an event of biblical importance, prophetic importance. You know, just like the world was waiting for the Messiah, the world is waiting for something else right now. This is where the information in this next video fits in, as we look at this repeat of the Bethlehem star, which we call the Messiah star. And as we see, it was the most significant star sign of all time, indicating the coming of the Messiah. I think it's very easy to understand that the Messiah star itself must therefore also be a sign of great importance. And as we've seen how the signs in the sky were leading up to this event, and that this was the key event that happened during the tetrads, would have to say that this is something of great importance. That's why it all happened this way. So what happened in 2015 that this star would herald? We've had some time go by. What actually was so important in 2015? Well, let's look at some things that happened in that year. One of the things that we learned in this Midnight Cry video is this. This prophecy in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1 through 3, was being literally fulfilled by the Messiah star light in the sky. Yahweh revealed this to me, and I know this is true. You will have to ask him about it yourself to verify it. Once you have all the facts, I ask you to pray about it. But this is what he said. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of Yahweh is risen on you. He's speaking to Israel. And he says, for behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the peoples. So this light that is foretold in Scripture was to come at a time of global darkness. And of course, it's speaking about spiritual light and spiritual darkness here. It's speaking about the light of the glory of Yahweh. And so the darkness would be the opposite of that. Did that happen in 2015? Did we have such a darkness descend over the globe? Actually, we did. Let's watch this video.
A momentous weekend for the Sustainable Development Goals.
It is so decided.
With the UN's official adoption on Friday of 17 goals for ending extreme poverty, fighting inequality, and tackling climate change by 2030, world leaders signaled their commitment to a bold new global agenda.
The agenda you are adopting today advances the goals of the Charter. It embodies the aspirations of people everywhere for lives of peace, security, and dignity on a healthy planet.
Meanwhile, leaders from almost 200 nations addressed the General Assembly Hall throughout the weekend in support of the post-2015 development agenda.
Today we can say to all the people around the world, 2030 agenda is for you, it's for everyone, everywhere. Preparations across the United Nations system are in full swing to support you.
Why do I say the UN 2030 agenda adopted by all nations in 2015 is darkness covering the earth? Well, under the guise of sustainable development, if you look at what these goals are that have been adopted, and you look at all of the sub-information that goes along with that at the UN, and that's a lot of reading, what you will understand is that this is a power grab. And it's not only a power grab of the people of the world, but it's a power grab literally taking over the place of the Creator in this world. In 2016, the World Economic Forum explained this global vision of the 2030 agenda. Here's a video showing what they said. This is the World Economic Forum's video. Does this look like a bright future to you, or a darkness descending across the globe? Do you think this will bring real peace and security, as the UN said it would? Or is this global darkness? Do you think you could have everything stripped from you and then you'll be happy? Because that's what Agenda 2030 intends to do, is to take everything away from everybody in the world, take control of that, and that's going to make us all happy. That's darkness. Because what goes with that? Freedom. A darkness the world is slipping into very rapidly that will remove all freedom from the world. Now, they try to dress this up. I'm sure you could see that in the video. But really, one of the big goals is to remove the United States. And they've been working very hard on that, because with the United States, you remove the Constitution of the United States, which represents rights given by God. And that's all passé to these people. They are coming out with a whole new thing, Agenda 2030, and for them, that date is firm. They are moving things very quickly towards that date, and this is why this darkness is covering the earth. The pandemic, with its theft of basic freedoms, its devastating financial impact, along with the riots we've been seeing, the political upheaval, the corruption that has been exposed, the huge deception, much of it we're getting from the media and other outlets, the fraudulent elections that we have recently seen. These are all manifestations of the global darkness prophesied by Isaiah covering the earth. This is the UN Peace and Security Agenda 2030 of the globalists. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the peoples. And you know, in Luke, it talked about the nations in great perplexity. These two things converge together. And we're seeing all of this unfold right now. The perplexity that we have seen globally during this pandemic is really unparalleled. No one's ever seen anything quite like this. Now, all of this is for a reason, and that is their next big move. To move things forward very rapidly for the 2030 agenda, it's the Great Reset. It's the World Economic Forum, the people that produced the video that I've just shown you. And this is their plan. Who are these people? These are all of the most wealthy people in the world, representing the most wealthy corporations in the world that want to have this reset. And what the reset is about is the 2030 agenda and pushing that massively forward. And what the pandemic was about is softening you up and everybody else in the world for this to happen. You've already had a lot of experience now with this great darkness that's coming into the world. Most of us want it to be over. We think that perhaps taking a vaccine or something is going to turn things around and we can return to normal. But you see, this is not about returning to normal. This is about fundamentally resetting the world. How the world works, how people think, how they live, everything about it. As a matter of fact, what is being called for is the Great Reset. This is a page from the website of the World Economic Forum. Who are these people? These are the most wealthy people in the world that essentially run the planet already. These are the people who head up the major corporations of the world. These are the movers and shakers of the economy in the world. What they're talking about to bring about the 2030 agenda is to use the pandemic and these other problems that have been created in the world to bring about something they're calling the Great Reset. And this reset is really all about pushing the world forward where the world doesn't want to go, more deeply into the 2030 agenda, to take away more rights, to take away our freedoms, under the excuse that somehow we're making things better. In a time of such darkness like this, where the economic powers of the world are basically staging a coup of the whole world to take over the world, to take it away not only from the people, but from the Creator himself, to take his place. This is indeed a time of great darkness. And in this time of great darkness, this is when we need this light from Yahweh to come, the glory of Yahweh to rise upon his people, for him to raise up a people, to raise up the remnant of the 12 tribes of Israel. That's what all these signs are about. The 12 tribes of Israel. and the glory of Yahweh, Yeshua Messiah, and his believing remnant of Israel. What is happening, what this star sign is all about, is that this is now underway, that the remnant leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel are being called. You can read about them in Revelation chapter 7 and Revelation chapter 14. These are specifically chosen out of the 12 tribes that are actually named there in the book of Revelation. What do these 144,000 leaders from the tribes of Israel stand for? The light is rising on them as the alternative to the global darkness. Have you noticed that even believers, really the whole religious system, is pretty much going south? There's only individual believers that seem to be upholding the truth of Scripture, upholding faith in the God of creation. We're seeing churches and entire organizations and denominations caving in to the darkness. There needs to be a great reset among Yahweh's people. We need to essentially go back to the first century. Who led in the first century? Wasn't it actually Israelites that led that movement in the first century? Didn't Yeshua Messiah come to Israelites as the focus point from which that work would go out? That's who the 144,000 are, friends. That's who they are, representing the light of Yahweh in the world. You know, in the first century, there were no denominations. There were no sects and divisions. There was one body of Messiah in the world. For his purposes to be fulfilled in these last days, that has to happen again. The 144,000 are being called. They will be raised up. They will be sealed to this work, all part of the one body of Messiah. And the rest of the remnant of Israel who are believing, who respond to them, will make up, along with them, Yahweh's nation in the world. The remnant nation is the alternative to the global darkness. Something new, but not something new. Just a new manifestation of a very ancient connection, a very ancient relationship that Yahweh established long ago and from a certain point of view, even before the world was created. This is what the Messiah star is all about. And I'm telling you, you might be one of these people. You could be one of these people, one of the 144,000. You could be one of the remnant of Israel. Or you could be a Gentile who simply is looking for the place of light in the midst of darkness, and there's a place here for you. Every righteous person needs to know and understand that this is going on in the world right now. And really, the best thing to do right now, if this is a whole new idea for you, is to open your mind to it. And you have nothing to fear. Turn to the living God in prayer and simply ask him, what is this all about? What does it mean for me? And how can this help me to get through this darkness that's descending in the world. And then listen in your spirit to his spirit and let him lead you in relation to this very important thing, invisible to the world, but nevertheless spiritually real, that is the answer to the darkness of the world. That's what we have for you today. Now that we have shown you all of these signs, we're finally ready to pull all of this together. And in part 5, we're going to present to you the coded message for mankind revealed, in which we will go more deeply into what all of this means. And I just want to tell you, this entire series and really much more that touches on all these things we're discussing can be found at Zion.net, TSIYON.net. You can sign up for free, and you'll find a great deal there available to you, absolutely free, that helps to explain all of these things. Right on the home page, right down the middle of the home page, you'll see a bunch of banners for various seminars we've done that will help to unpack all this for you and bring new understanding. Things are different than you've been told. And I'm here to bring this truth to you. Please be with me for the final video in this series coming up soon.